How does someone hold a phone anymore? Is this how you hold a phone? Like, is this is the boomer way to hold a phone from what my teenagers say? So, ring, ring, ring. So ring, ring, you've just been licensed and you are getting a call for your very first placement. Let's talk about it. Hello, my name is Lauren and this channel is called Lauren Fosters, where we always talk about all things foster care and adoption related. If you're new to my channel, welcome. My name is Lauren. I'm former foster youth. I'm also an adopted mom of 10 kids. 6 of my kids were adopted out of the foster care system. And so we've been fostering for something like 11 years on and off. And we fostered in 3 states because we're also a military family. So I like to sprinkle that in here and there. So if you're coming across my videos for the first time, please hit like and please subscribe. So what happens when your agency calls you with a placement? If you're looking into foster care for the first time, I have a few videos already up about the licensing process. I just made one about the licensing process in general. I also have several that kind of like focus in on some of the steps of what that licensing process may look like and get a little more in depth. So definitely check those out. But maybe you're getting to the point where you're already kind of getting into the licensing process and you're starting to think, what's it gonna look like when I get that very first call? We've had to get licensed several different times because not only have we moved with the military, so we've lived in 3 different states and had to get licensed in those 3 different states, but we've also closed our home. Just we had an adoption and then we closed our home and then we've gotten relicensed and that kind of thing. So I will say that the waiting time from the time we got licensed, so the time we walked through every step of licensing, the classes, the home study, the paperwork, CPR, first aid, all those things, the time they handed us a license and the time we have gotten a call for our very first placement has looked different every single time. I don't know that we've ever gotten a call like the day of. We have had an agency talk to us while we were getting licensed about a potential placement that they had in mind for us that they thought would be a good fit, which was kind of intimidating because we were just getting started for the very first time. So if an agency tries to do that, it's okay to say like, let's put that in our back pocket for when, you know, we're licensed and more like ready, if that's like a little too intense. I felt like that was a little intense when they did that, but it's okay to like say like, hey, let's put this on a simmer and just get through the licensing process. But as far as those calls go, what's generally gonna happen is you're gonna get a phone call and they're gonna say, hey, we have this child or these children that need a home. Are you interested? Now remember that up to this point, you have most likely worked with your agency on what you're getting licensed for or who you're willing to take. And what I mean by that is there are homes that take teen girls only. There are homes that will only take infants. There are homes that take special needs. There are homes that specify I can only take children 0 to 10 years old. I will only take teenagers. So at this point, you should have already worked with your agency on what those parameters look like. And you may even live in an area where your licensing has to state as such. They have to state can only take up to 2 children, will only take this age group. But in some other areas, the license itself may not say that, but your agency should already be aware of what the parameters for your home are. So keep that in mind when that phone rings, because it wouldn't be uncommon for them to try to reach outside of the scope of those parameters, especially if it's not stated on your license. So if it's something you just kind of verbally agreed to and said, hey, like, let's aim at this, it's not uncommon for an agency to call and you say, okay, I'm only taking 0 to 5-year-olds, and they call and they say, hey, I know you said 0 to 5, but we have the 7-year-old we'd really like a home for. Now listen, at any point during any call, whether these children or this child falls within those parameters or not within those parameters, you're able to say no, and your agency should not hold that against you. And maybe you're wondering why you would ever say no to a child. There are reasons why homes have these parameters. I'm going to use the all-teen girl home for example. When I was in foster care, I lived in an all-boy home, which I know sounds crazy because why was I allowed there? It's a long story. I'll share it some other time. But for the most part, she only said yes to teen boys. I was part of a sibling set. Once again, different story. But it was for everybody's safety. It was because she knew that teen boys may you know, go after the teen girls and want to date them, and that's kind of weird. So she kind of primarily stuck to that. An all-teen girl home, for example, they may specialize in that. That may be where they feel the most gifted and is pouring into teen girls. So some homes will stay in those parameters, or maybe a home is really set up for infants, like they've got, every room's got cribs and toddler toys and that kind of thing. So bringing a teenager into that, you know, maybe as a temporary placement, sure, but like bringing a teen in permanently into that life may just not be fair for that teen or those parents. So that might be why a home says no. Now, another good example, and why I said that they may call you with something, with a scenario that's within your parameters and you are still able to say no, is you may be having a moment, like you may have just had a placement leave, maybe they were reunified or they left for an adoptive home that wasn't your home, or whatever the case may be. You may want a little break. You can say no because your work schedule got crazy. These are all things that you should kind of clarify with your agency ahead of time anyway. But it's not uncommon for foster parents to say no to a placement, and you shouldn't feel like an agency is going to hold that against you. And if you are an agency, don't you dare hold that against these parents. So I know that very first call is so exciting, just because while it's a terrible thing that a child is having to be removed from a home, all of a sudden your world's about to get rocked. So it's kind of this weird mix of like excitement and fear and terror and you know, I don't know, I've always felt like so full of adrenaline every single time I've gotten a call, just because you're like, okay, we can make this work. And you know, because they've called us with such a varying array of ages, you know, okay, do we have the bed for that? Do we have the toys for that? Do we have the snacks for that? I mean, all the things you kind of think about in that moment. But here's the deal, they're gonna call you, and this is what I should have said at the beginning. They're gonna call you and they're gonna say, hey, will you take this child or these children? Most agencies will let you say, hey, let me give you a call right back. Now take that little statement and stick it in your back pocket, because your knee-jerk reaction is gonna be like, yeah, of course. But what they don't want to do is expect you to be that home for that child, and then you go speak to your spouse later, or you look around and realize you don't have the things you need for that particular child, and then have to go back and say never mind. They want to make sure that they have locked in a home. So a lot of times what I would do when I got a call was I'd say, hey, let me call you right back. I'm going to call my husband and I'll let you know right away. And they were always perfectly fine with that answer. Never had it happen to me where I called the agency back and they said, you know what, you took too long, we found another home. But with that said, a lot of times these caseworkers are putting out a lot of feelers in a lot of homes. So don't be surprised if they're not just calling you, they're calling several people at the same time. But don't feel like you need to like jump on it either. Like, make sure the scenario is appropriate for you, and especially for those children. So what kind of questions should you ask when they call you? Obviously the basic questions, such as, once again, does this fall within the parameters of what you've agreed to? You know, is this a brand new case? Is this a brand new removal? Those things are important. Why is it important if this is a brand new removal? Well, because this child is coming in with the fresh trauma of having been removed from their parents. And that's something to be taken very, very seriously. And that's not a we rescued you moment. That's a whole video for another time, you know, but children that have just freshly been removed, if you don't know, that is one of the biggest traumas these children will ever go through. As somebody who was actually relieved to be in foster care, that was part of my story. I still looked at the removal and moving as a trauma in itself. And that was somebody who was like sign me up for foster care. I'm done with this other life of mine here, you know? And, but most kids don't feel that way. Most kids feel incredibly traumatized by removal, regardless of the scenario that they just walked out of. Hopefully you've been trauma trained by your agency to some degree to kind of be able to handle some of that. You also may want to know, is this child being moved from another foster home? If this child's being removed from another foster home, why are they being removed from the other foster home? Did the foster parent close their home? Did the foster parent have any issues with this particular child? Why is this child being removed from that home? We had a child once that moved into our home just because they were in a safe home at the time. They were with a family member, so they weren't quite in foster care yet, but they had been removed from their parent, their primary caregiver at the time, and that relative just could no longer care for the child just for monetary reasons and lifestyle reasons. So it wasn't like anything had happened with the child. So just because a child is being removed from another foster home does not mean that something bad happened. So don't assume that's always the case. Now, with that said, I have heard a lot of foster parents say they're not honest in these moments. They don't always disclose all the information. I'm a glasses half full, optimistic gal. I really do believe the best in people, and I would like to believe that caseworkers aren't being openly deceptive. I'm sure that happens. I'm going to say it right now. I'm sure that happens, because some of you in the comments are going to say that happens. I'm sure it does. But what I will say is that I think that most caseworkers get into this line of work, go through the degree process they go through in college to do this line of work that is really hard and really underpaid and really understaffed and just really hard to be a part of. I mean, just to be watching what they're watching every single day with these kids. I don't believe that a lot of these people get into this line of work to be deceptive. I think a lot of them are really just wanting the best for these kids, trying to find them a good home, trying to be as honest as possible because they don't want the foster parents to burn out and they don't want these kids to not have a place to be. So I think they're trying to be as open. They may not know. So another question you may have during that phone call is, are there any medical concerns I need to know or any mental health concerns I need to know? And they may answer you as best they can, and the answer may be, as far as we know, there's nothing. And then this child comes in your home and you go, like, this child clearly has some very severe ADHD or something to that effect. That's just an example. And they just may not have known. It may not have been something that was disclosed by biological birth parents at the time of removal, and it may not have, or it may not have been something that maybe the other foster parent had noticed or had diagnosed or that kind of thing. So don't be surprised if that's the case. Simple questions to ask. Where was this child removed from? The parents, the foster parents, a potential adoptive placement, and why. They may not be able to give you case details if this is something fresh, or if there's an investigation going on in the home they were removed from, whether that be from a foster parent or from a biological parent. They may not be able to give you those details quite yet. Some states are more open than others with that information and more forthcoming, and some aren't. They can give you what they think might have happened. They may not know if a child has had a history of abuse. They may not know that right when the child is being placed, but that may be something that kind of comes up through therapy or while that child is living in your home. So once again, that's not them being deceptive. They just may not know the answers to that question. So that's kind of it. At that point, you either agree or don't agree to take the placement, and usually that placement is going to happen right away. On the other hand, we have had a couple of instances where the placement was more planned, where the children were coming from a home that was closing for whatever reason, or a placement that was going to be pre-adoptive. We were going to be the pre-adoptive placement, so they maybe parental rights were either already terminated or were about to be terminated, so the children were coming into our home with that knowledge and knowing that was going on. So then it's a little more planned out, as in, hey, we're bringing them on this day with their things, so you have a little more time to plan things out. But in general, you're going to get that placement right away. If you know you have parameters on some of the things, like, hey, I'm only taking children from 0 to 7, your agency's already likely going to have you have in place those measures, those beds, those cribs, those toys. If they're teenagers, they're going to have you have those things that a teenager may need freshly upon walking into your home, but some other good things to have, especially for, actually I was going to say little kids, but this goes across the board. Have snacks. I know that sounds so weird and so random, but when you're in crisis, there's something to say about just sitting down with a snack and having something fresh to drink. So having like fun snacks and that kind of thing for a kid that maybe has skipped a meal because of all the chaos that ensued before they've come to your home. What happens after that point is a whole nother video about that first day of them in your home. So I will save that for another video, and hopefully this helps. If you have any kind of tips on what to do when you get that first call, feel free to comment down below. If you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. And if you're someone who's gone through this process, feel free to answer some of those questions. If you have a different perspective, that's totally fine. Once again, I'm always just speaking on my perspective. I know that I don't speak for all foster parents. I don't speak for all adoptive parents. I don't speak for all former foster youth. This is just my 2 cents on what I've experienced. So anyway, I hope it helps, and I will see you next time. All right, bye. Subscribe! What was I gonna say? I forgot, man. My brain just went. Okay. So if you're coming across my videos for the first time, please hit a like and please hit a subscribe. Wait, that's dumb. Hit a subscribe. And just bit my lip.